Welcome, everyone, to a new episode of The Soul of a Story, where I ask writers to share the inspiration about what they wrote, hoping to find out more about the spark of creativity, what gets us to do what we do as writers or artists of anything. I'm happy today to have as a guest a friend of mine, all full transparency, a great friend of mine. And even though we're both in our 30s now, an old friend of mine, Frank Haberle. Frank is a writer's writer, I'll call him. He has written several books. I love them. Beautiful short story collections, Downlanders, Shufflers. I want to ask him about that. He's published prolifically. He teaches writing. He lives writing. He's also a grant writer, development director, raised a lot of money for good causes, knows the social justice world back and forth. And he also is one of my favorite things about Frank was he was in a band at one time. He was a boy band guy. He was a boy band guy, but kind of a death metal, alternative boy band guy. But anyway, hello Frank, how are you?
Hello, John. I'm great. Thank you so much
And
for having me on
Frank,
the
I
show.
call him Francis sometime, but Frank, where are you right now? Where are you beaming in
John, I'm in my
from?
great room here. I'm in the kitchen because I've been kicked out of the living room. Uh, but I am in the kitchen of our 750 square foot villa in scenic Park Slope, Brooklyn. My wife and I have lived in this apartment for 30 something years, almost 40 years. It's a rent stabilized
Nice.
kind of old school Brooklyn floor through on beautiful Carroll Street. So we're
Oh,
about,
I love Carroll Street.
oh yeah, we're about 2 blocks from the park, Prospect
Mm.
Park. Uh, yeah, yeah. So it's tight. We live in here with our three kids, two of whom are still with us, and so we have a bit of a hoarding thing going on here. So you can see I have chips and extra supplies behind me, but yeah, that's where
That's
I
good.
am.
Well, Frank makes me laugh. I'm going to laugh throughout this. It's very fun.
Oh, good.
But I know this apartment, I know this street, and I know this building, and it's absolutely lovely, people. It's absolutely, I would never leave. It's gorgeous. You got your co-op around there, right, Frank? Isn't that,
Two blocks away. That's right. I mean, it's
yep.
so worth
And
it.
you write the newsletter for them, isn't it? You
I
did
don't
that?
anymore. I'm actually retired. I
Okay.
after you work there, you have to work a work slot once a month to be a member of the co-op, and that's why the prices are so great because
Okay.
we're a member run working co-op. Um, and my last job there was writing articles for a newsletter, which was much better than my prior job, which was working in the basement cleaning out the cabbage leaves from. So but I got to retire, and the great thing about retiring is now when I go up to the cash register to check out, and the person's working at the cash register, I totally have no problem with being the old man who's like, "Oh, so how do you enjoy working here?" and waiting for them to ask me what my workshop is, just so I can tell them I'm retired. So,
There you go.
yeah, it's terrible.
Well, I love it. It's the food co-op there, and it's such a great thing. And I know
Great.
anyone I know in Brooklyn, they just love that place, and
Mm.
they usually know Frank. So Frank and I met at a job. We both worked at a place a long time ago, Shake and Looking and Barreco, professional grant writing place. And I think quickly over a plate of fajitas and chips and all that, we were kindred spirits. We both like Big East basketball. I went to Villanova. Frank's got St. John's rolling through his veins and all that. We were just talking about the great teams, the Chris Mullins and all that. And I like to think Frank is the Chris Mullen of writing. He's smooth, he moves, he's purposeful. He's just got that. And you're a lefty too, right?
I'm a lefty. Yes,
Right? See, the
yes,
Chris Mullen of writing.
yes. I
Um,
have terrible acne, but no, that's
that's
a joke.
but I'm gonna back to that time. What I really did, I think connect with Frank. He's funny and humble and all that. And I really, what I most admire about Frank, other than his band, which I'm going to ask, he went to Gettysburg College, right? The Bullets, right?
Gettysburg Bullets.
And he was a lacrosse guy. Is that right, Frank?
Yeah, it's a third string goalie.
Third string goal. You know what?
Yeah.
Those are the best, the third string
Oh,
goalies.
you get to see a lot of good games from the third string spot. Yeah, it was a lot of
So
fun.
I'm gonna take you back in your life a little bit. So
Mhm.
first, what was the name of the band? I've asked you that 1,000 times.
Yeah, the band was called Meltdown. Um, and it was actually my senior year in high school. I went to a boarding school up in Massachusetts, and we were kind of fascinated with this punk thing that was going on. This was the late '70s, and at one point, much more talented, musical, and cooler people than I was decided, hey, let's start like a joke punk band, and at a we'll perform at the student center on a Wednesday
Uh-huh.
night, and wrote about 6 songs. And they invited me in to be. It was a funny role. I wasn't the lead singer. There was a guy, Peter Stack, who was an amazing, like very talented artist. But
Uh-huh.
they let me come in and be kind of like the lead noise guy, and I kind of stood behind him. If you've ever seen a ska band, there's a guy just kind of dancing behind,
Yeah,
and then every once in a while they'd let me make noises, and so they called me lead noise. So I would just
that's a good thing.
bark out noises and stuff. It was really fun. And we played, and the school went nuts. It was really great. But we found out later that the headmaster thought that we were so great that he nominated us to play in this giant arts festival for all the boarding schools around New England.
Uh-huh.
It was at Pomfret School. And we went out and we did this performance for like, I want to say 500 kids who thought they were going to a
Wow.
dance. Preppies, the preppiest preppies in New
All
England.
James Spaders out there, right?
And the lead guy and I, we came out with these big coats, and I remembered, and everybody was like, "Well, what is this thing? What's going on?" And as we came out with these big coats, and the lead guy said, "Hello, we were going to play some music for you," and then we took off our coats and turned around. We had our punk garb on, and I said, "But we decided to do this instead," and then just went into this punk thing, dead silence, just like 500 preppies glaring at us. I mean, it was so I think that's what punk is. We were not. It was not. What's the word? Good. We were not good, but it was a lot of fun. That was a lot of
My
fun.
God,
Yeah.
I would give anything I see. I would dig it. That would be
Yeah.
me. I had a
Yeah.
black coat, but no one
Yes.
ever let me
I know
open it
that they
up.
were fun. Yeah.
Um, you know what I mean? I just love that. I think punk. What I liked about that
Mhm.
is there was humor, right? It was self. You know what I mean? It was sort
Yeah.
of. I think it's lost. I'm sorry to be this old crank guy, but
Yeah. Yeah. No.
Timberlake never came out with a coat like that. You know what I mean, and all that. Um,
Yeah.
but
It was like a
Meltdown didn't
prank.
have legs, right? It didn't. But
Well, we all
Frank,
graduated, sadly. One guy, the bass player, went on to be in a band, and I went to see them in Hoboken in your one time hometown, like in '80. He went on to play in some pretty cool stuff. His name was Nicholas Naylor Leyland, and he played with a band called the Manhattan Project, not the Manhattan
oh,
Transfer. They were kind of cool. They opened for they played in they were kind of like big kind of punk underground band. They were kind of
yeah.
cool. Yeah.
I bet you it was at Maxwell's, right? Was because that was like a
Yes, he was
big
at Maxwell's. Yeah, I went out to
yeah.
Maxwell's. Yes.
Back in the day, I don't know. I don't even know if it's still around or whatever. I saw a bunch of bands there, Smashing Pumpkins and all that. They were good. I used to ask
Gorilla
them if they would
Tango.
book Meltdown, but they would never. They would.
No,
Do you think a reunion of
I've
Meltdown could
always
be?
said we have our reunion coming up. I can't remember. Is it 45 or 50? And I'm always joking about, are we getting the band back together?
Get the coats out. Get the coats out.
We're on walkers. It's going to be great.
Yeah, get the coat, Velcro
Like,
coats. Get the
hey,
coats.
we're going to play some music for you.
All right. So
Yeah.
you went to private schools and all that. You were a New
Mhm.
England kid.
Mhm.
I know you still love the Pats and these kinds of teams and all that. You
Mhm.
go to Gettysburg.
Mhm.
Tell me about Gettysburg, because that was you got some great stories about the
Yeah.
ghosts there and all that. Tell me a little bit about going to college
Yeah, it was very interesting. I flunked out 3 times
there.
from Gettysburg. It took me 6 years to finish. I want to say my grade point average was a 2.08. Um, but I had an amazing time. I went there. I played lacrosse the first year. I just didn't connect with kind of the academics there, which was
Uh-huh.
unfortunate, which is an unfortunate thing when you go to college. And I ended up leaving. I got kicked out for grades after a year and a half, and I ended up on this great Kerouac journey for like a
Nice.
year, and I just ended up kind of flat broke. I hitchhiked across country. I
Wow.
worked in a factory in Colorado. I don't know. I just traveled a lot. I spent a month on the Appalachian Trail hiking 300 miles on the Appalachian Trail. Just kind of back and forth, and just had this great year.
Yeah.
But Gettysburg was cool. I went back and I ended up moving kind of into town and just becoming, a friend of mine used to joke that we were kind of townies who take classes. We weren't
Hmm.
really, and so we ended up living uptown and spent an incredible amount of time wandering the battlefields, like at night especially, and they're amazing. I mean, there's just a lot of, I don't know about ghosts or not ghosts, and I don't remember really what I think I
Right.
saw or didn't see, but I just remember like there was just like a real like kind of weird energy there that was
Yeah.
kind of you couldn't not search for it, if you were kind of
Hmm.
in tune with it, and that was a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
really kind of cool thing because like something horrible happened there over three
Yes.
days, 100 and whatever years ago,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
beautiful place though. Like I really fell in love. I dream about it
Oh.
um, constantly, and I write about it a lot. I write about, I place these stories. Mostly not so much about me as about people I knew there, got to know. I
Hmm.
was just kind of like trying to work a story about this coke dealer who was fascinated. She was kind of like the center of this whole
Uh-huh.
network of people who I knew, like who lived in the neighborhood, but just a fascinating person. Um,
Wow. Well,
yeah.
listen, I graduate, I've said this before, I graduated Villanova with a 2.0, so you got me by a point 0.8. You know, and I would say it's a lot harder to do that than to
Yeah.
get the 3.5. You got to
Yeah.
miss a lot of
You
classes. You
miss a
got to
lot.
miss you got to
Yeah.
disappoint a lot of people. You got to have a lot of fortitude to
Yeah.
do that.
Yeah.
But
And you have to think your way around like
oh yeah,
all the
I think
times
at
you've
West
got
Point
class.
they give an award for the guy who comes in last or the woman who
Yeah.
comes in last.
Custard,
Um,
right?
but I like, listen, as I'm getting older and older, like I think there's something out there that I don't know. And so I
Yeah.
kind of can imagine whatever happened in those fields, the energy there or whatever, it's got
Yeah.
to be something. And I remember you used to articulate it so well. I used to love those stories about the
Yeah.
battlefields and all that. So after Gettysburg, what do you do?
Well, I ended up for a year, 2 years. I was in Baltimore for a while, sleeping on my sister's couch, and then I for about 6 months, and then I ended up in. I had a friend who called me, an old friend from the boarding school, from the band actually. He called me. He was in Germany. The Pats were playing the Chicago Bears in that great Super Bowl, and he was like,
That's right, Jimmy
Pats, you
McMahon.
gotta, yeah, that's right." And got to come out. We're going to watch it in Germany. It'll be so cool. So I said, okay. So I went and I got on People's Express and flew over there and hitchhiked down to Munich. We couldn't find the game, but I ended up over in Europe for like 3 months and just had this in the winter.
Hmm.
Um, we rented a car at one point. And we like slept in the car in France.
Oh,
Oh, so cold. And ended up in Ireland for a couple of months, which is really cool. And then came back and moved up to Boston. Bunch of again, a couple of kids, one kid from Meltdown, and a couple of other people got together. And they had like a group house in Alston, and I drove around with his friend delivering futon furniture and assembling futon furniture around Boston in a truck. And I was the passenger and the navigator. He was the
right.
driver, and what a great job for about a year. I mean, it was so
Oh,
cool. And
God.
every inch of Boston. Like I was just
Yeah.
up there with my son a couple of weeks ago, and I go, "No, we turn left here." And I just knew where I was
You're
going.
just pulling futons out of the thing.
Yeah, yeah. Let me show you. Let me give you a hand with that, kid. Um, and then I came back. I came down to New York at some point, and for about a year in New York, I really struggled. I was here living in a room that was like the size of like a closet.
Hmm.
Um, I moved in there, and then there were three other people who lived in the apartment, and then one of them, his brother was a squatter down in the Alphabet City, and they would come up like once a month and like take showers and
Hmm.
cook stuff in our kitchen and warm up,
Right.
and then they would give us crap for like paying rent to the man for living in an apartment. They were great, but I worked in an antique store, which is really cool.
Oh.
Helped the guy like kind of like sell off. He was going out of business over on in Chelsea. I worked on the piers doing trade shows, which was like one of the hardest physical jobs. So
Yeah.
they have these like quarter-mile long warehouses, and we had to roll around on rolling like scaffolding and hang cable so that
Oh.
we could hang lights for the trade shows. I had the best arms I've ever had in my life doing that job. But and they were like 24-hour shifts. They all paid like $6 an hour.
Uh-huh.
And then I was out of work for a while. I was wandering around. I was actually very good at finding money on the street. I never like bummed money, but I would
That's
like look
my
around.
dime.
That's right. Hey, I saw that first. And bumped into somebody I used to know at Gettysburg who was like, "Hey, we're hiring somebody. We need a data entry clerk. I'm at the Children's Aid Society, and they pay $6 an hour, and you can eat all the day old David's cookies you want because they donate their day old cookies, and we just keep them in the office." So I was like, "When do I start?" So yeah, and that's how I ended up like in the field we ended up in with grant writing. I was there about 3 or 4 months, and I started kind of very shyly and modestly like correcting all the typos in the thank you letters that they mass
Right,
generated from
right,
this data
right.
system. And the boss who was like this like New Canaan preppy woman
Yeah.
was like, "This young man obviously knows how to, whatever I knew. I
He
knew how to
can
write.
write.
He could write, damn it." So yeah, and I ended up doing that for like 5 years.
When
Um yeah.
when did you go to Alaska? Because I
At
wanted
the
that part
end
of
of
it.
that 5 years, I ended up, so I'm 31 years old, and I
Uh-huh.
actually like worked so hard in that job. I used to joke, and you know this too. It's like you end up like getting just pulled in, and you're
Yeah,
sacrificing your youth on the altar of social service,
yeah.
and just was wrecking myself. I was just drinking
Mm,
too much. I was working too much. I was like
mm-hmm,
throwing myself into this. I was volunteering the weekend, taking the kids to the park and stuff, and
mm,
just burned myself out completely. And then I met somebody who was going to Alaska one summer and talked me into coming and traveling with her for a bit. And I just all of a sudden just dropped everything. I just said, I'm just done, and gave notice, and got all
mm.
my backpacky stuff together from my younger years as a backpacker and flew out. And I traveled with this friend of mine for like 3 weeks. Um, and we did things like we went to Denali, we went hiking in the backcountry of Denali, we went
Mm.
down to the camped on the Homer Spit. I think I
Huh.
was looking for a job like fishing or something. Yeah, I thought I was going to get on a cannery or on a.
Yeah, yeah.
I took one look at the people who were living in the shacks. And
Yeah.
also, it was a bad year for some reason. There was like a red tide or something, but there was some
Yeah.
reason why it was a bad year for the fishing industry.
Mm.
Um, thank God. So that friend left. Another friend like came up at some point. We traveled around for a while. Ended up on this like year and a half long trip. Lived in Bend, Oregon for a while, working construction. The
Mm.
big thing about it though, like Alaska, for some reason, I just quit drinking. I just stopped.
Mm.
I was like
Mm.
31, and I just
That was it.
woke up in a tent next to a dredging machine by the Chena River. Looked at all the other bums who were getting up to go to the bar at like 8 in the morning, and said, I just don't think I want to do this anymore. So I just ended up kind of being clean and sober for the rest of my life without, doing it in any kind of program or anything, but just kind of deciding that.
Right, right.
Um, and ended up having a great time. I ended up in Bend, Oregon, working construction, cleaning carpets at night.
Mm.
uh this friend I was traveling with, she was like waitressing, and you have this ideal, like at some point you have this romantic
Yeah,
ideal when you're sitting in that office at Children's Aid and you're going,
yeah,
I really just want to be like a construction worker and out in the
yeah,
rural somewhere, and I'm sitting in
yeah,
a diner waiting for my old lady to get off her shift.
yeah.
And it kind of ended up there. I mean, it ended up not being
Right.
so rosy, but and she fired me soon after that. Believe me, she was quite tired of traveling with me, and I don't blame her. But yeah, and then I came back to New York, and I don't think it was much longer after that I met you, John.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
yeah,
Well, listen, you're, people are listening out there. This is why Frank's a great story writer. He's a great storyteller. And what I like of, and I recommend everyone buy his books. And he writes like he talks with a little, with the craft to it. But, as writers, there's a little bit of Bukowski in you in terms of the life. Like, Factotum is one of my favorite books ever, where he's got all these
yeah, yeah.
jobs, but you're a little nicer and you're not, that's how
Mm,
I feel. I think Frank's better. But I think as writers, there's two ways you can go to get material. You can live it, and you got to know a lot, right? If you want to write,
yeah,
or like an actor, you got to kind of live it, experience
Mm,
it, and ups and downs and all that, or you got to listen really well
mm.
to other people.
It's
Because
true. Yeah.
I don't overlook that too. One of my favorite writers, Somerset Maugham, was always bopping around and all that, but his superpower was that he would listen to stories,
Mhm,
and then he would literally sort of like transcribe them in a way that was like fiction. So, but you have this really kind of very American Jack Kerouac kind of like life cycle. But I think what makes it wonderful and all that is like you don't set out, well, I'm going to do all this because I'm going to be a great American novelist, and
mhm,
a lot of people think they should do that. I'm going to go out on
mhm.
the road and I'm going to experience every kind of hardship in the world because this will make me a great writer, and they take their dad's Amex and go off.
It's true.
I kind of dig your story because I think just as just you were just I wouldn't say lost at all, but you just got to move, got to do things, got to see things, and I like people, I like things, and all that. So am I right on that, Frank?
Yeah, I really appreciate that, John. Thank you. I think that's one thing I've really thought about is the stories that I kind of end up with that I like that I've written aren't so much about like me and how cool I was because I was working at a as a fry cook in a clam shack, but it's about it's usually like trying to figure out like the people around me who are much more interesting people. And the Somerset Maugham thing that I think is interesting is he puts himself into the stories. When you're
Right.
reading The Razor's Edge, he's the
Yeah.
guy visiting. It's
Yes.
very clear that he's the guy visiting, but he's really an observer.
He
Things are
is.
going on around him. And
Yes.
I don't know. I think as I've gotten older too, like I've gotten away from like having to explain like why I went to Alaska and
Yeah.
and trying to like I put myself less into the stories, and I think I'm just so much more interested in like the people who I kind of can't forget about. I can't forget
Right.
about who I met and what they said, and
Right.
um, yeah, and so somehow that's much more interesting to me, and so I write more now. I didn't really write then, and I think that there's just these voices that you keep hearing for the rest of your life. And
Right.
why is that? So,
Right.
um, yeah, so that makes like
No,
really
well
great
said.
material.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, to me, you fit the bill of a writer too, because I always say writers are tweeners, in betweeners.
Yeah.
And given what you've told us and what I know about, kind of a very high level education, wealthy people around, you know what I mean, in
Mhm.
certain regard, and then not. And so
Yeah.
you're like, where do I fit in here? Do am I
Mhm.
with an upper crust crowd, or am I with the cannery people?
Yeah.
And that's the greatest example of that is Melville.
Mhm.
Melville made his father, he came from a
Yeah.
wealthy family, really rich
Yeah.
kid. And then the father lost everything. So Melville was
Mhm.
highly educated, could write, could all that. But then he had to go get a job and he got on a boat.
Yeah.
And so because of that, because he didn't know where he fit in, he could observe.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
I think the observer part of you, and we could sit here for days, and like maybe part of your, let's call it wanderlust or whatever, was this inner writer, this inner
Mhm.
curiosity.
Mhm.
But I still think there's something about this, like, where do I fit in?
Yeah.
And I don't know. And I think that's where good art comes from. These people are trying to, like,
Mhm.
it's like Ray Liotta and Goodfellas. You could hang out, Frank, with you could have tea with the Rockefellers,
Yeah.
and you could also then, sit next to the threshing machine,
Yeah.
right? But you can't
Yeah.
belong to either. That's the problem.
No, it's true. It's really true. It's so
Yeah.
yeah.
By by the way, you
So
got to write a book called, what's it? Next to the threshing machine, next to the thing or whatever, or a
which
story. Well, I forget your line. It was like I woke up in a tent next to a threshing machine,
yeah. No, it was a dredging machine. It was
dredging machine.
yeah,
Okay.
they were sucking like they were clearing out water out of one part of this river under a bridge. I didn't know that when I set up the tent at 2 in the morning after hanging out at the Botel bar and breaking the jukebox because I don't
Okay.
know, it's a long story. But like you wake up and you're like so hungover and the mosquitoes, you can just feel them outside the tent. You hear the thing go just making this noise. It's sucking
What
water out of
that wasn't your nickname in Meltdown, the dredging
the
machine, the
dredging
dancing?
machine. What a big guy.
All right, we'll have too
Yeah.
much fun with Frank. Let's get to the point. All right, Frank, I have brought you here to share with the audience, uh, contributing to the podcast, a series, The Soul of a Story. Frank has a lot of soul and he's got a lot of stories, and he's written them. So within your, again, I know you've written tons and tons and tons, but do you have one that you might share of how it came to you for the idea or but whatever, and how you kind of like how it first came to you and how you took
Mm.
that to the next step of writing it?
Yeah. Yeah. I have a story, a short story I wrote recently. I was really excited. It
Oh,
got
good.
published by the Letter Review, and it actually won their prize. So I got the Letter Prize, which is kind of
Oh,
cool. And it was
congratulations.
$300, which is, for me, I'll take it,
I'll take that. Give me
more than I
half.
made for any of my books. But it was the story. What I like about that story is that I spent a lot of time trying to develop it, and it's a story about when I was like flat broke and I was in Dublin on that trip I referenced earlier, and I met this guy. I met this couple actually, and they were like 17, 18. Um, she was pregnant, and her family back in California didn't know that she was pregnant. And
Mm.
the guy, they decided they were going to go off to Europe for 6 months and not tell their parents that she was pregnant.
Uh-huh.
And then they were going to go back to Ireland because he had dual citizenship in Ireland, and they could have he just had this thing in his head. They would just have the baby there and then give it up for adoption, and then it would be this big secret, and the parents would never find out because they would kill them,
Mm.
not kill them, but they were from conservative
Yeah,
families.
sure.
And the guy was like I loved this guy. He was fascinating, but he was so charming. He was
Mm.
absolutely beautiful. He was just this
Mm.
beautiful young guy. They both were. They were both just like stunning. And he was like dark Irish, and he was like tall and
Right.
thin, a really sweet guy. And he at one point they were flat broke, and he decided, I've got a trick, but you've got to come with me, Frank, because I befriended them, and they decided that I was like a wise person who could like give them
Uh-huh.
advice, which is like I did not want to do. So um but he decided I should come with him to his grandmother's house and just hang out with her and be my usual like charming whatever self, which he had in his head. I'm not terribly charming, but like I can tell stories, and he thought, because there was this great tension between this grandmother, he had barely seen her, but he knew
Mm.
that if I charmed her and I just talked to her for an hour, she would see what a great
Oh,
friend Simon could have, and then he'd hit her up for 100 pounds.
right, right.
So I wrote a short story about this, but I kind of based it more on this guy's like a street poet who I was another person I met when I was in Dublin at that point. A guy who was trying to sell his poems on the street. He would stop you and read you his poems. So I did. The story is with the street poet, and he's coerced this guy into going up there and getting money from his grandmother just by being
Mm.
charming. And there's this whole like kind of exchange of stories and this like her
Mm.
expressing her disappointment in the guy. Um, the story came out, but I spent a lot of time with the story because I really wanted to kind of get the flow of the language. Like
Uh-huh.
there's just a lot of weird language and it just came together. Like
Mm.
sometimes you just and I
Yeah.
I think from a writing perspective, John, I'll say that you need to stop by, you need to listen to them. Don't
Mm.
try to sit there and write what they say, but sit and kind of think about them and think about
Yeah.
kind of what they would say. And
Yeah.
so I think like this story to me was a really fun example of something that just kind of came out right because I
Mm.
let the characters, like the me character is not me, the guy character is really not the guy. But the grandmother really happened. She lived like we went out to some part of North Dublin, got off the bus, and we were just in this field of rubble. And I was
Oh,
like, "Wow, did like the Germans bomb here in World War II or something?" He's like, "No, it's just everybody just
right.
abandoned it."
Right. Right.
So,
Right.
and then there was one house on the top of the hill, like
Oh,
it's like Adam's family stuff, and
beautiful.
she was just living there by herself and just insisting on holding on to this house and not letting go.
Wow.
And then he said, "Hey, do you mind going?" After we hung out for a couple hours, and then I left, and he came down the hill like half an hour later with 100 punts, and he said, "Go, let's get soused." So we just went to a bar and burned through half.
You love the
Um,
Irish.
yeah, it was really funny. It was a very, but I think like the most important things about that story is really like letting the other characters talk, and also
Yeah.
kind of just like taking myself out of it and kind of getting somebody who's a little more kind of
Boy,
interesting in there.
boy, that's really good. That's so
Yeah.
insightful. What's the title?
The title of that story is Only That You Remember Me, and it's something that
Oh, I
this is
like
true.
that.
I would sit in St. Stephen's Green, just freezing. It was just
Yeah,
snowing every day,
yeah.
and there was this old guy who looked like Rasputin. He would come by, he had a big beard, a big great coat, and he would walk by every day. And you'd see him. He would walk by, and he'd see you, and he'd say, "Greetings," and you'd say, "Hi," and he'd walk halfway, and then he'd turn around and he'd say, "I ask only that you remember my name," and then he'd walk away.
Are you
That's what he
kidding?
said. That's Dublin in '86. It was so cool.
I've just realized what I'm going to start saying the rest of my life now to people.
I
Same
ask
thing.
only that you remember my. I don't know what your name is. How would I remember your name? I mean, it was
um,
very funny.
there's a lot. There's so much to learn. I mean, the one thing what I like about writing
Mhm,
is because it can be it's an affliction in some ways.
mhm.
Like Frank and I are going to write till we drop,
Yeah,
but you always learn what Frank gave out about letting other people talk and all that is it's so simple and smart, but it's so hard to get to that point. It takes
yeah.
a long time to let go of that and like every other good piece of advice and all that kind of things. It's like, well, why don't I do that? You
Mhm,
know? But I'm
yeah,
sure, Frank, that took you a long time to kind of like come to that, right?
yeah, yeah. And I think, I mean, thank God for the subway because I mean, I spent
Yeah,
10 years going back and forth to the Bronx,
yeah,
and I would just sit there and kind of daydream about, and I feel like that's where I was kind of writing stories, like I was
yes,
writing them in my head. And what I was doing with the typewriter was editing, like it was already a
right,
second draft by the time I sat down with a
right.
laptop with it. And, I've always felt that. And
Mm,
something will set your mind. Something's a prompt on the subway.
yeah,
If you're not staring at your phone or, pretending you're asleep because a pregnant lady just got on and you don't
right,
want to give up your chair, like
right.
most of New York, you, I mean, but the most important thing is there are so many things coming at you that just,
Yeah,
but all of them are prompts. You just have to see them as,
yeah.
I don't know, somebody with a
What
blue.
what
uh,
what got you all of a sudden to say, okay, I'm going to write this one? Like
Well,
what
I think
was it just I want to write something and this is now I finally had enough gestation
mhm,
time on it or like
yeah, I read something about it like 20 years ago that was kind of dreadful. It was kind of like
okay.
verbatim the story of this
Yeah,
couple I met in Dublin, and it just wasn't. It wasn't a story. It was like a
right,
diary, very long diary entry.
right,
So,
right.
but I think it's been very helpful. I run this class that's actually I'm going back to prompts because it's a
Uh-huh.
prompt-driven creative
Yeah,
writing class at the Creative Center, which is this really great thing for people with lifetime medical issues we have this great class. And we get together once a week. I bring in the prompts and then I write with them. And I wish I could remember what like the prompt was to have me write like the first part of it because I ended up
right.
writing about this character who I saw as like the street poet and how he jotted nonsense down in a notebook.
Hmm.
Um, so I think like the first part of it might have been stuff that I had jotted down in a
Yeah,
notebook, and I was kind of thinking, well,
yeah,
that's kind of cool. Some
yeah.
of it was like anything inspired by Yeats or stuff.
Right,
I can't
right.
remember what started it, but it was really the language that this street poet
Yeah.
used. That
Well, there's I can't wait to read it. And when you're talking about the characters going up to borrow money from the grandma, and if I bring a charming friend, it's such an innate tension there, and
yeah.
it's like, and that's what good writing is.
Hmm.
The readers relate because there's something at stake here too, and it's in the let's go get soused after. It's just like so like it can the readers can be self-righteous, they can be this and all that. It's just so human, and
Yeah, yeah.
that's and a lot of times people, how do I write fiction about something that really happened? And I'm
Mhm.
like, by the time you get to the keyboard or whatever, it's like the rain comes down and goes through the aquifer and comes out. It's going to be different water,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's just how it is. And that's where craft comes in. And then that's where stick-to-itiveness comes in because it's not
Mhm.
easy to finish these suckers, you
Mhm.
know. But I dig that. So is that's published,
Yeah.
right? Right. Okay. And what's next? What's next on your agenda? What are you doing?
Well, I've been doing a couple of things. I started trying to write poetry last year.
Oh,
It's
nice.
not what's the word I'm looking for? Good. It's not good poetry. It's kind of funny. I had a poem published somewhere. That was kind of cool. But
Nice.
and then I think, John, I'm moving into like a short story collection. I really want to get
Good.
like that's something that I my first two books were really very obviously a bunch of short stories spot welded together in some
Uh-huh.
kind of order in order to create like kind of a novel in stories. Um, but I just like, I'd like to create a space if I can, like try to move a short story collection. That would be really exciting. I wrote a long story recently that I really like, and it envisions like I read a lot about my little brother and our relationship.
Hmm.
And I wrote a story about a little brother who goes to Gettysburg to find his big brother and surprise him, and like
Uh-huh.
hitchhikes down there, and instead gets dragged into this
Oh,
drug operation by these local people who
oh,
figure
I
out how to
like
con this
that.
kid. Yeah, it was really fun to write. It's called "Come Looking Little Brother." It's got a really good. I like the vibe of it a lot, but I don't know if it would ever get
I like your
published.
titles. I like your
Yeah,
titles, Frank.
thank you. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
I'll put when this show goes out, young people out there and old people listening, I'll put links to Frank's books. I really recommend it.
Oh, thank.
He writes just as well as he talks these stories. And, Frank is a real short story writer, real storyteller. And he's good. He's lived a good life and he's got a lot of life to live and more to write. But last words, Frank. What's your recommendation for someone graduating and not knowing exactly what they want to do in life? What do you say to them?
I have a
Yeah,
Yeah, I have advice that's not probably going to be very popular, but I think don't jump into these MFA programs that cost $300,000 and for creative writing. Like I
yeah,
think wait some years, like you did, and you also did it in a public
yeah,
institution, so which totally is a
yeah,
totally different thing for me. But I think that there's kind of a mindset. I'm gonna. This is gonna sound I don't want to sound negative about it because I think
right,
they're probably really amazing, and I could
right.
honestly never get into a program like that. But I mean, I remember like in a lot of times I've just run into people who are just went right from undergrad into MFAs in creative writing and made this, they make this big investment. Usually their families have made a big investment, and then something's on the table there. I mean, you're sort of under a lot of pressure to get an
Yeah,
agent, to get commercial writing
yeah,
going,
yeah,
and to write what everybody's seeing in the back of the New Yorker, which, obviously I'm never going to get back into the back of a New Yorker, but I think that it's very hard. I think that you would learn so much. I learned so much working in a factory on a loading
right,
dock in Colorado for four
right.
months, desperately poor,
Yeah,
$4 an hour, people treating me like dirt boy, and
yes, yeah, yeah,
I just value that experience so much. It's not necessarily what I need to write about, but I learned a
right,
lot about human interaction, um, about language, about the way things work and move. I mean, it was
right.
fascinating. It was a giant factory where they made solar panel systems, which you can imagine in 1982. First of all, what a solar panel weighed in 1982. I was another one of those points in my life where I was in the
Right.
best shape of my life. But loading giant 18 wheelers with just panels
Yeah,
and machines. And then I just think, as a writer, I think it's really important I mean, I just want to say listening is just so much more. Listening
absolutely.
and reading is so important.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
that's my when I wrote my first book and I was looking for representation. I had a friend who was an agent. I couldn't convince him to represent me. And I asked him and he kind of gave me this he's like keep reading, read more, like
Yeah.
read. That's how and he represented Billy Collins, this great
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
and that was sort of the advice, like just read. This agent gave me good advice because I was like, should I quit my job and go off and write? He's like, don't quit your job. He's like,
Don't
you know what I
quit.
mean? And I tell young writers all the time, work. and
Yeah.
one is like you got to pay the bills, all
Yes.
right? Because the writing world is a tough thing. The other thing is though, if you
Mhm.
want to write about people, people work, people go home, people are upset, people are on the subway,
Mhm.
people sometimes don't have much money, people are hungry, sometimes they have a lot of money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you gotta experience it. So
Yeah.
I dig it. Well, thank you, Frank. And everyone out there, I recommend you buy this young man's books. If you can find a Meltdown CD out there, I mean, send it to him.
Bootleg. Got to be a
And
bootleg somewhere.
we these this is a very fine man. I really grateful to him, and more work coming. So Frank, as my people say, as the Irish say, thank you.
And
And
as my
let's go
people, the Irish, say,
the Irish. All right, Frank. Take care,
okay, John.
everyone.
Thanks
Like
so
and
much.
like people and subscribe to the channel. Okay, bye.